Perfect. All right. Well, yeah. So my talk today is on the DataOps challenge, and it's really streamlining your data supply chain. So as a forewarning, obviously my company's Zaloni. This is kind of what we do. So we're certainly going to get into some Zaloni specific stuff. That being said, I always hated when I went to meetups and people just gave a sales pitch for an hour. And I remember thinking, like, I'm not here to buy your product. I work for a 10-person company. Your product is like 2 million, zero chance we buy it. So that being said, I'm going to try to talk about some of these things at a larger picture of, hey, how do I streamline my data supply chain, whether that's our product arena or not. But there are some things that we do that I wouldn't have necessarily thought about before. So I think there's pieces that even if you're at a smaller company, you can say, oh, okay, I could probably build that. Maybe, hopefully you can't build it as good as we did very quickly. Otherwise we're going to go out of business. But a lot of times you can say, okay, I can build this kind of small scale to meet my needs as a, smaller company that's not looking for enterprise software. So, but my slides are very marketing because I have a marketing team that makes much better slides than I do. So whenever I start to drift away from their slides, you'll notice the quality is going to substantially sink down. But I also always like when people would introduce themselves. So in case you were curious, the one with the air is me. So this is my wife, my dog Bruno, and our horse, my dog Bo and our horse Bruno. So no kids, but I always joke we have a dog that takes all the time of a kid and a horse that takes all the cost of a kid. So it's, essentially the same thing.
But it's better than your average piece of ice.
Yeah, it's free, cuts grass for free, so it's helpful there. So
DataOpsDC.
Just quick background. I went to Virginia Tech, like I said, go Hokies, if there's any Hokies. I actually studied aerospace engineering, which if you're wondering what that has to do with DataOps, zero, absolutely nothing. I studied it. I thought I was going to like it. I never did. So I kept studying, thinking I was going to like it eventually, and I never did. But I have the paper on my wall. I claim rocket science. Brief background and career we talked a little bit about, but my entire career has been in data analytics and IT, specifically around healthcare typically. But now I work for a company called Zaloni, and we're not only in healthcare, but that is one of the verticals we focus in. So that's the one that anytime we get a healthcare company calling, I always get excited. But enough about me. So what is DataOps? Hopefully we know if we're at a DataOps meetup, but like all buzzwords, one thing I found out in my career is every buzzword, people have a different idea of what that means. So from our perspective, and based off what was the first result when I Googled it, DataOps is defined as the automated process-oriented methodology used by analytic and data teams to improve quality and reduce the cycle time of data analytics. Now, I thought that was pretty dry and honestly not very insightful. So I tried to break it down of like, what does this actually mean? And when I think automated, I think, how do I do things automatically, speed it up? If I want to stream data in, right, I'm going to use something like stream sets to make that easy and pull data in quickly. Process oriented, I tend to think more people, right? People are the ones that often need processes. And then obviously improve quality and reduce cycle time, make things quick. So if we spice it up or shorten it down, I should say, how do we make technology and people work quicker and easier? And I think that's really kind of the heart of DataOps. And so that's what we at Zaloni try to do. And hopefully we can talk a little bit about how we do that to, shorten time. So a lot of people might ask, why do we need to do these kind of things? Well, there's a ton of different business priorities. I don't have to tell y'all, with today's technology, whether you're trying to increase efficiency, reduce risk, obviously things like GDPR, CCPA, all of these different kind of regulations that are being built out every year. things we have to deal with. We all want custom kind of personalized experiences. I get pissed if I get advertised for shorts, but they're the wrong size. They should know that by now. And then growing revenue, reduced cost. I think those are about the most, oldest time business priorities. How do we make more money and spend less? But with data and technology growing like it is, there's a lot of really new and exciting ways. So here's where we break away from our typical marketing slides, if you can't tell by the clip art. But what I found is most executives think how they kind of implement this is, one, go and hoard a ton of data, get any kind of data you can get your hands on, CSVs, JSON data, XML files, I don't care what it's in. Let's just shove it all in what we'll call a data lake and hope it, doesn't look awful. Hire a ton of data scientists, data analysts, data engineers, data stewards, data janitors, anything that has the word data in it. Step 3 is usually pretty murky to them on kind of what happens there. They just typically call it magic. And then 4th, they hope they make money. But we obviously know that what really happens in step 3 is this long convoluted process. Colluded, I don't think that's a real word. Convoluted, there we go. Long convoluted process on how do you find your data? How do you get access to it? Request it from IT, find out it's the wrong stuff, start prepping it, bring in different data sets, do more preparation, get your results. They're typically not even right the first time, so you got to start all over. And so it's this really hard mess of that magic step and how we kind of do all that. So why is that? Well, excellent, double click there. This is really what I think is the heart of it. Is at the bottom right, we have a lot of really great data and we capture things that we didn't know before. And like we were talking about before, with the cloud and God knows how many tools, we have a ton of cool technology nowadays. And I think, like Christina could probably tell you, it's not always easy to actually implement those things. One, it's 600 different things you got to learn. But 2, at least in the space we're in with enterprise software, we work a lot with like banks. Banks, they don't have, they're not coming to make their first data lake. They made a data lake in Oracle, 20 years ago. And then when Cloudera came around, they made a data lake with them. And then they made, a data lake in Azure once Azure first became a thing, but it got pretty screwed up. So there's just a ton of technical debt, different formats, different, people are purchasing third-party data, people are streaming data in. And so the biggest problem is this kind of gap between these great tools, this great data, and what we're actually all trying to get to, which is value. Well, I don't care if it's, something built out in Power BI, or maybe you're making a model in a Jupyter notebook or a Databricks notebook, or, insert favorite analytics tool. There's a lot of great pieces there, but the problem that we see a lot is connecting this middle piece. And so that's really, I think, at the heart of DataOps, what you got to get through. And I saw this XKCD comic not too long ago, and it kind of reminded me, I thought it was pretty great, but basically them saying, hey, I made this fully automated data pipeline that collects all the process we need. And the lady says it's a giant house of cards built from random scripts that's going to completely collapse the moment any input does anything weird, which is scarily enough how most major banks backends look. And
Preach it, brother.
yeah, what do you know? It does. And that's, it's, for those who work in it, a scary reality of what this gap looks like for a lot of people. And then there's a lot of holes in that, right? Like when you're stitching these pieces together, there's holes of like data falling through, a ton of stuff not being controlled, governance nightmares. And so the way we resolve that, and obviously Zaloni has our specific approach and how we think it's best. But what we found is really kind of these 3 things have to happen: catalog, control, and consume. And so again, you'll see in a short little demo how we do that. But even outside of our platform that focuses on doing that in, you know, a single pretty unified solution, insert buzzword. These are actually the three things that we found users really need to do to kind of do that. So catalog, you know, as you think about using your data, you got to catalog it. So know where it's at, know descriptions of it, like what is this data set, instead of just like test_1.csv, test_2.csv. Like I need some metadata about it so I can understand it. Control, if we have a ton of data there, all the CISOs start freaking out because, again, it's a giant risk. So you got to have some control mechanisms, whether it's who can access it. Our approach is a lot on how do we also do additional things like tokenization or masking, you know, different obfuscation methods, and even taking control not only in a privacy perspective, but also in a quality perspective, which again is a very important piece. And then a lot of times, even where we see customers or, you know, potential customers or other people trying to fill this void is they recognize they need to catalog their data. And again, maybe they're using like a Calibra, or AWS Glue has actually a pretty decent catalog nowadays. And there's different kind of control mechanisms they can put in. But where they really struggle is the third part of consuming. So if you're building out this great, you know, data lake and you want to shorten this life cycle to actually provide value, if you don't in some way make it easy for your users to get to the data and actually use it in a Tableau, a Power BI, a notebook, again, whatever it is, they become absolutely pointless. And that's, unfortunately, having worked in healthcare, what I've always seen is everyone has their EHRs and they hoard all this data. I don't even know if I'd say they catalog it, but they control it because, you know, HIPAA's a thing, but they never actually get to use it. And so that's why there's really no value there. So that's kind of the main point that I like to drive home is, whether you're using us or not, if you want to actually provide value, you kind of need to think about how you approach these three things, and start lining up different softwares or tools or services you can do to build out a pretty decent, you know, pipeline. That's typical marketing slide. So that being said, let me show you what it looks like in our platform, because, you know, marketing, it'd kill me if I didn't, right? That being said, though, again, maybe some of y'all are looking for some enterprise software. If you are, hit me up afterwards. Love to talk. But even if you're not, again, I've talked to some different customers that have, or clients, they didn't end up being customers because they were way too small, but they said, well, this is helpful because this helps us know what we need to go stitch together for our own so we can make a cheaper, you know, maybe not quite as good, but it gets the job done for us. So I'm logged in. Here's our pretty little homepage with a bunch of graphs. But, you know, obviously we're a big believer in this idea of catalog, control, consume. And so what we do for our customers is, you know, we can bring data in and we make that easy. We can use things like stream sets, shout out to Mike, or, you know, other streaming softwares or products, I should say. Whoops, did not mean to click that. And we can apply different quality control rules. But really the thing that I'll show is, the key is how do you make it easy for your customers to access? So what we aim at doing for our customers is, how do we let them search our catalog, right? Ingesting data into a catalog and applying different, you know, transformations. That's the easy part. Maybe we have Spark doing stuff under the covers. But if I am a data analyst or a business analyst, I'm typically not, you know, a DevOps engineer who wants to go figure out how the heck do I get this out of my Teradata stack and land it in my, you know, desktop so I can run it on a Jupyter notebook or run it in AWS and use SageMaker. So we kind of automate that process for them. So if you're thinking about your catalog, maybe think of how you can easily search across your catalog. Now, our catalog lets you catalog both data sets, tables, etc. But we also catalog different data artifacts. So for us, that might be a workflow, that might be a model, that might be a report that you've built out. But obviously, we can kind of drill down here, and we utilize a zone-based architecture that's kind of baked into the product, so I can drill down even deeper. I can select different groupings or projects, and I can go in and I can take a look at my entity or really data set here. And the key thing to think about as you're building a catalog is, how do you provide technical information? That's easy. You should be able to capture that pretty straightforward. But how do you link that up with business data? So we use things like labels, descriptions, key value pairs, custom attributes. And that's really what we've seen is helpful for users, to understand data. Because as you think about, streamlining your data supply chain, it's really about, how do I help my consumers find the data they need, search it, but then understand it very quickly. And so of course we're giving them more details, like, how fresh is the data? What's the data preview look like? We can even drill into fields and see details about that. On the control plane as well, the data engineers can go through and apply different data quality rules and data privacy. But again, thinking as, how do I make this easy for users? The key is to kind of give them that one centralized location where they can understand the data and the data lineage. So again, if you're thinking on a small scale of maybe, how do I build something like this out? AWS Glue, I think, does track lineage as well. So it can show you, what kind of dependencies do I have on my tables? How are pieces being used? Maybe this table is feeding into other tables, creating an entirely new data set. So that's a kind of a key perspective that is something to think about, both from a user input as well as the technical user, someone like a data engineer. But then kind of the final piece that I'll show y'all real quick, that is something, I don't know that I know of an open source or easy way to do it, but it is kind of one selling point for us is we actually provide users a shopping cart-like experience so that they can use their data. So if I want to use this data, our adage is, if you shop for data or shop for clothes on Amazon, why can't you shop for data from your own IT department? So I can add that to my cart, and I could go through and add a bunch of different things. But we can provision that out and automatically spin up a sandbox for our customers, so that as a business analyst, I don't have to be a DevOps person, but I can just say, hey, I want to spin up an AWS instance. I want it to come preloaded with things. After so many days, get rid of it. Maybe you have some kind of approval process, thinking back to governance, that's something we help implement. But then also, where do I land it? Maybe I want, because I'm a Snowflake user and that's really easy for me, I want to go and land it in, Snowflake. And I can provide my credentials. And just like that, I can land my data in Snowflake. So that's kind of how we make it easy for our customers, at least, to land data and go, again, kind of accelerate that time to analytics. But as you think about maybe for your company or your project, how you do that, again, it kind of comes down to those three pillars of cataloging the data, controlling, certainly if you're at a company, being a high priority, but then that final piece of, how do I consume that data and do that quickly? That's a key thing you want to think about, so that you can speed up that time to analytics. So on that note, man, I breezed through that pretty darn quick. Any questions?
Yeah, so I guess this tool allows you to kind of get a bird's eye view of like all your data is and where to send it to. I guess, can you mention like how would somebody use that data? So I'm like a data scientist. I have my Jupyter notebook. how can I extract like the data I just put into Snowflake and I just put into a pandas data frame so I can play with it?
Yeah, so we have a couple different, ways that you could land that out. So a lot of times our customers are landing it in a database. Maybe they have, they're landing on MySQL because their Tableau connection's already set up there, so that's easy. We also have the ability outside of just like relational databases or Hive, which are the only two ones I happen to have set up in this demo environment, to push that directly to, again, maybe like a Tableau, as well as something like an S3 bucket or FTP. So oftentimes, maybe I'm going to land that on my personal computer, and then I'm going to go ahead and, read from that with my Jupyter notebook. And then what they do, that kind of is endless, right? We work with a lot of banks, we work with a lot of healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
So, a lot of times it's, hey, how do I better understand what customers are buying and how do I cross-sell? Or for healthcare, it's all about how do I get more revenue based on my insurance claims. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, that was good.
Perfect. Any other questions?
Yeah, I was curious, what do you guys use for your data catalog under the covers, if you're allowed to tell me?
Yeah, no, but by all means. So some of it's proprietary. We are using Hive for a lot of that. Now, that being said, we're getting out of Hive or really Hadoop dependency regardless. So some of the different things we do, like data quality actions, are being driven by HiveQL. And so because, Hadoop is not the monster it once was, we're kind of transitioning. So we are a microservice architecture with some of those not being super micro, being a little bit bigger than that. But the goal is to kind of, Sparkify everything so that I can spin up different services. And again, if I'm thinking about running that on something like Kubernetes, I can just spin up real quick a Spark instance, process my data, and then land it again wherever I want, S3, Redshift, etc.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Another question I had, I guess, is what would be like the spin up time to get somebody using this tool for their, I guess, data?
Yeah, so depends. To get the instance up and running, I have a script that we wrote that I can spin up an EC2 instance and have this up and running in 30 minutes. For our customers, again, our customers, just as this kind of backdrop, are largely banks, but also like financial services. So like Toronto Stock Exchange, Bank of England, Bank of America, and then we're also getting into some of the consulting firms like PwC, KPMG. So they're really big, and those are like 10-week, getting them up and running kind of service projects. But they of course are really large companies. So I think half of that is just project managers going back and forth about, why their Microsoft projects timelines don't line up. But yeah, to spin the actual software up, it's pretty quick. Like I said, we can run it in containers, so maybe on Kube, or we can also run it bare metal on just an EC2 instance. Or because a lot of banks, for any of y'all who are in banking IT or trying to sell to them, a lot of them are still pretty outdated and on-prem Hadoop clusters. They're moving to the cloud, and they've been saying that for years, but they're still on-prem or largely Hadoop based. So a lot of times they're running a massive EMR cluster in AWS or something like that.
Hey, very very cool. So I've got a question. So with this tool, you can do like data grants for a certain number of days.
Mm-hmm.
How does that work in terms of durability? like, and what if the data changes during that time period? Does that break a lot of things, or is the system pretty reliable?
Yeah. So what we are doing when we're doing that is we're actually creating a copy of that data and landing it in a sandbox environment. So, you know, as I was checking out, right, and I decided I want to land my data, we're doing a stale or stagnant, I shouldn't say stale, it's got such bad connotation with it, but a stagnant copy of that data. So, you know, as you think about data streaming, and we're not taking any new data, it's saying, hey, here's a copy of that, let's land that. Now, we do have customers who are constantly updating that, and I'm actually curious on, I guess I could follow up on what exactly that looks like in terms of also that data lease concept. But for us, because we're orchestrating the spinning up of that sandbox environment, the data just landed there, they can use it, and then we'll automatically just remove it after, you know, X given period of time. And that's a pretty, actually, kind of a big hit with, again, some of those really large enterprise customers, because, you know, they have like 30 different departments that are all sharing data across, and everyone's terrified that, you know, legal's terrified that finance is gonna spill some of their data, and they're also worried that accounting is gonna mess up their data. So they all like this idea that they can give it to them for just a really small period of time.
Very cool.
Yeah, I'd like to claim I built it myself, but I just get to be the guy that talks about it.
That's as good as building it yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Well, no, I do get to sometimes do a couple fun things, but yeah, it's a fun job.
Can you take us back to the slide with the lineage, if it's not too difficult?
Yeah, I apologize. In an effort to, again, not just sound like I'm going into full sales pitch, I breezed through some of it. So if it's none, or if any of that didn't make sense, please let me know. I'm happy to repeat. Like I said, I just didn't want y'all thinking, great, I listened to a Zaloni sales pitch. That was phenomenal.
And can you click ingest history? Is there a way? Okay. All right.
Yeah. So the idea that we're doing here, and again, other catalogs do parts of it. I do have to, you know, of course, say we do it better. And some things I legitimately do believe we do better. But is you wanna make it easy so that you can quickly understand kind of every aspect of that data. You know, what's in the data, what's been done to the data, how's it being used, how often is it coming in? Because typically, right, it's not just this data set that was made and it's never being changed. You know, it's usually being updated. Now, as some, you know, new cool open source technologies like Delta Lake are becoming more popular, that's also helping in aspects there. So as you want to see how your data's changed and evolved, there's some pretty cool stuff going on with Delta Lake that helps you do that.
So can you click on each of those headings, details, fields, blah, 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 from left to right for us?
Yeah, so details, business information, technical information. Again, how do I quickly understand? Fields, obviously giving us information about, you know, I could give details, I could look at my data profiling, etc. But the additional things that we typically would point out here is, as a technical user, if I need to assign different data privacy aspects, I can just do that with a check. So I can apply a masking pattern or say, hey, let's encrypt this with SHA-256. In this case, it's a zip code, so maybe I don't need privacy, but I can see I have a bunch of clearly fake zip codes, you know, something like we probably all do when you go in and the form asks for something, so you just put a 0 or like 1111. So we can apply different data quality rules. Maybe I want to apply this valid US zip code, which makes sure it's a 5-digit zip code that's not all zeros. I can do that. And then ingest history, you saw how often is it coming in. Lineage showing us what's being done to it. So in this case, you know, I have this data set I applied a bunch of those different data quality aspects. And one thing that we do for our customers is we'll actually break the data up into 2 separate tables. So, if you're a data engineer or a data steward, or, insert data title, you're probably going to be responsible for fixing that. Where if you're the end user, a business analyst, you don't care about the bad stuff. You just want the good stuff. And again, you can see all the different actions we've taken on it, applied some quality or some tokenization, and created an entirely new table. So you could jump into that. So as we take a preview of this data, now our phone numbers are hidden. Our emails are random bits of encrypted strings, so different hashes. And then data quality is really just kind of a quick overview for the user, how many rows failed and got put in that bad table data set in preview, obviously you saw.
Neat. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Is this where I find out, Helga, you're sitting there writing notes on how to steal the inside use of Arena?
I don't think so.
If you do it,
haven't been in data for about 12 years now.
okay.
Welcome
So
to
I
data.
yeah, I have to ask, what brought you to DataOps then?
I was just trying to learn new technologies, new terminology, software, things like that.
Very cool. Perfect. Any other questions? All right,
Yeah,
who's ready
I
to
got
buy?
one.
If y'all want to send the check to me, or
I was just wondering if you could share like a customer success story. Like I always enjoy hearing those. Like, yeah, and maybe that's just because I give them so often myself. But like, I'm just always so curious. Like, what's the success that you think is the most interesting?
yeah. So probably best success is also one of our biggest customers. So Bank of America, I mentioned. So they use us internally, and they actually call us the data bank. So they completely white labeled our product, but it's Bank of America using us. So obviously we're going to say, do whatever the heck you want. But actually, I think I have a slide on it somewhere. Yeah, there. So they use us internally. They call us the data bank, but their entire organization, anytime any of the different departments need to get data, they use us. So, most of Bank of America doesn't know Zaloni exists. They don't know our product named Arena exists. But they use us day in and day out. And the cool thing is they're searching through 5 petabytes of data, so a crap ton of data. And because they have so much data and obviously regulations, it was taking them 3 months before to actually deliver analytics. So by the time executive says, hey, I need this dashboard, it would take them about, on average, 3 months. And we shorten that down to 6 days, which 6 days in my mind is still about 5 days longer than it should be. But governance, what are you going to do? So yeah, it's pretty wild in how we were able to reduce their timelines.
That's cool. That's really cool.
Another practical solution for it would be trying to get money back from people that owe you. So when I worked for HSBC, we worked on systems for collections, and so you would put all your data into a data. Well, in those days we didn't have such fun stuff, but anyway, you could then track down phone numbers to call people to get the money back that they owe you. So yeah, the collections is a big one for.
Yeah, so we actually have, they're not closed yet, so I can't mention specific companies, but one of the largest European collections agencies is getting ready to buy us as well, purely for that aspect. So they can track you down if you're living in Europe and get their money back. So if any of y'all live in Europe and want me to, nix you off the list, don't worry, I'm here for you. I'll cut you. I'll conveniently, we'll mess up and remove that record.
Data transformation step. Remove banjo.
Yeah. Like, yeah, so I was looking through your code and there's this really interesting step where you search all the data for people named Banjo and delete.
It's a very interesting SQL query. Did it go through code
Yeah.
review?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, so
Cool.
if you would mind telling me a little bit more about what else you guys got running under the covers, because it seems like there's a lot of really interesting stuff already, and then it looks